This episode of iFanboy is brought to you by C2E2, the Chicago Comics and Entertainment Expo.
So let me get this straight.
Okay.
A leather jacket.
Yep.
Right, a little plastic sheriff star trinket.
Could have been metal.
Could have been metal. Some welding goggles. And a hockey stick. That's all I need to be a hero.
Well, you need a goatee.
According to these covers, I do.
But he didn't have a goatee in most of this. Uh-oh.
Oh, wait a minute. Hey, welcome to iFanboy, your video comic book weekly discussion show. I'm Ron Richards.
Some semblance of words that go together. I'm Conor Kilpatrick.
I'm going to compose myself. You don't know why we're laughing, and that's what makes it fun. I am Josh Flanagan. We're here today to talk about Starman. We've been... listen, this show has been long in the making.
This is an event.
Yeah, it is. I read Starman a while back, and even I was after the curve, but I was like, well, we can't do a show on it until these guys, and they were like, we're waiting for the 3
The impetus
years.
has been the years-long, 6-volume omnibus special.
Has it been 2 years that they've been publishing?
2 a year.
2 a year? Wow.
So we've been waiting a while to do this show. We were going to do it as soon as they finished. They finally finished, and we read them, so showtime.
All 6 volumes of the 82.
81. Well, no,
with the zero
because
issue.
there's lots of extra issues in
Sure,
it. So
yeah,
this
but
is
at
like
least
around 90 issues.
But
I
yeah,
think,
so 6 volumes. That 6th volume was a thick one.
$300 worth of retail book right there.
It really is crazy.
It's quite a bit. Starman, as written by James Robinson, was a comic book series that came out from DC Comics. It was in continuity, but sort of on its own thing. It started in 1994 as an outcrop of the Zero Hour event, which no one remembers. Yeah. So it's fine.
Yeah, Zero Hour was the first appearance. Jack Knight, who is the Starman, his first appearance was in the Zero Hour book that James Robinson and Tony Harris did.
Now, I wasn't reading comics back then, so I came to it later.
You missed Zero Hour had cool metallic ink on the cover, like the Zero Hour was the silver.
I have 0 Hour 1 for some reason.
Really?
I don't know why.
You missed nothing.
Yeah.
Bad idea.
And because when I came back to reading comics in the late 90s, it was one of those things that I'd always heard about, and I bought a couple of the trades and I read them, and I liked them. I liked them pretty good. But if you remember, these have handy numbers.
Yeah.
On the spines. Those trades didn't. And so every time I went to the store, I ended up at 4 or 5, and I was like, I don't know which one's next.
They did that with the JSA trades, too.
Yeah.
I don't know what order to...
And so I never ended up picking up the next one for a really long time.
Actually, yeah. You would always be at number 4.
Yeah, and then finally, I got a bonus at work, and I was like, I'm just going to buy the rest, and I'll figure out the order then, which is what I did. So I ended up reading all of them a few years back, and I loved it. That reading them all the way through, really, having the beginning, the middle, and the end of the whole thing, it really is one of my most favorite superhero stories.
And I remember when you got the trades and you were raving about it, and you're like, you should really read it. And for some reason, when this came out, this series ran from 94 to 2001. Yeah. I was barely reading any DC then. Mm-hmm. I was reading JLA and The Flash. I think that was it. And so I had no knowledge whatsoever of this series other than just hearing people saying, oh, it was amazing, it was great, it's whatever. But I just had no interest, no knowledge, and I never paid it any mind.
Well, I didn't read it because in 94 we were teenagers still. We were in high school.
In our glory days.
And I was very much a traditionalist I was a big JSA fan.
Yes.
In the 90s there was a couple of attempts to do the JSA before Jeff Johns and James Robinson did it later on. It was a success. But before that they had a couple of miniseries. And it was very much a traditional series. It was the original heroes. They had their costumes. And so when Starman came out, it was all about how cool he was because he didn't wear the costume. And he was rejecting the old tropes of being a hero. He's going to wear his regular clothes.
Modern.
And be a cool guy. And so I was like, fuck that.
Except it wasn't that at all.
No, but that was the marketing for it. It was
charity.
He was like, hey kids, this guy wears a leather jacket and he wears his jeans when he fights. And I'm like, I want him to wear the red and the green suit. That's what I want. So I rejected it for that reason.
Completely. Wow, that's almost like a reason I'd reject something.
They were marketing it for Ethan Hawke in Reality Bites.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And I was, as a kid, I was like, no, I want this. I want the tights. I want the cape.
You're a purist.
You still like that.
I know.
No, but it's different now. But it was a rejection of what I liked at the time.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I was like, forget it, that I'm not going to read it. So that's exactly why I didn't read Starman, even though I'd heard for years and years and years.
And you missed out on it.
Yeah.
You missed out.
Although, you know what? I think I appreciate this more now as an older person than I would have as a high school college student.
But what it turned out it was sort of overall was, we're going to talk about this, and we're going to sort of talk about the overall things, and then in a little bit we're going to talk about what actually happened. So you're safe right now without spoilers,
no spoilers,
but then we'll let you know when it's time to be worried about it. But, I mean, what it is,
It's a coming-of-age story.
But it's a coming-of-age story.
Yeah, totally.
At first, you've got a character who's rejecting everything that came before him. That's part of his lineage. It's Jack Knight. His father, Ted Knight, was Starman in the 40s.
Yeah, it should definitely play on the fact that James Robinson, who before this wrote The Golden Age, which was like an all-sorts story about the JSA kind of period, Starman very much picks up that concept of legacy in DC Comics, but in a very personal, familial kind of way.
Yeah.
So as you mentioned, the original Starman in the 40s with the red and green fin. Yeah, Ted Knight. That is Jack Knight's father. And the book picks up where his brother has taken on the mantle of Starman.
And and this is in the first issue, so it's not really spoiled, but he dies right away. Yeah. And so somebody's got to be Starman. And Jack reluctantly is like, I'll do it.
Jack's
right
the
now.
son who didn't care about the legacy, didn't care about being a superhero. He's a hipster guy. He
was artsy like his mother.
He collects junk. He has a junk store. Not junk, collectibles.
Yeah.
And doesn't care about Dad's whole Starman thing, but does it because they kind of have to. He's got no choice. Yeah. And then the whole series is about his arc, his growing up, his accepting his legacy, his father, his family, his whole history, and then eventually...
Because 80 issues of, that stupid dad
isn't going to work.
would be really bad.
And then by the end, becoming an adult. And you know what's interesting is, you mentioned how it's sort of out of its own bubble. This is such a rarity because superhero comics aren't allowed to have a 3-act structure.
Yeah.
You never get to Act 3.
Well, and
so this is a complete beginning, middle, and it ends.
Yeah, and when people always look for like a superhero story with an ending or whatever, it's
almost a Vertigo book in a DCU.
Yeah,
totally.
It is. I've been thinking about this lately, and it's actually really bothering me because these are my favorite kinds of stories. There's no doubt. Like if you think about like Preacher or Transmetropolitan, Why the Last Man, those are things that's and Marvel never does stuff like that really for the most part.
The end of
there's not like a 60-issue run that's on its own. That's a thing.
Right. So he gets a character to a certain point,
and
then
Runaways.
They leave him. Yeah,
Runaways.
Kind of.
Right, but then they did what they normally do.
They tried
again.
to keep going.
Astonishing X-Men's actually probably the closest that they would have to that. It's something that DC tends to do more often. These are my favorite kinds of things, and we're in a market right now where doesn't sell because.
This book would have failed spectacularly if it came out.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not going to sell because you have to be on from the beginning to appreciate it. It's like The Wire, or a TV show like that. You have to read it from the beginning. You can't jump on in the middle because it won't make sense to you. It really won't.
That's why these omnibuses are great, because for everyone who missed it like me, I picked up Volume 1 and wrote it all the way through Volume 6 and was able to...
The way the market is now, though, it wouldn't survive the issue stage, which is really sad, but we have them now, and so that's good.
It picks up on the legacies of DC, but it also picks up on the idea, there's Metropolis, there's Gotham, Starman lives in Opal City.
Which is a huge character.
Which is a huge character in itself. The city itself becomes such a huge part of the story and an overarching kind of theme. In addition, there's a vast and great supporting cast.
Really one of the truly great supporting casts.
Rounded out,
But that's one of the things that makes this book really deep. What I came away with this book is, its structure is unlike. Another reason why it wouldn't have succeeded now is because he'll have 3 issues in a row where he's building, and then the 4th issue he goes back in time for an issue.
Yep.
And then you have to wait another month to find out the resolution. Like, people would have freaked out now because they don't like when you go back. But he fills in this world that's decades long, from the 40s through the 90s.
Older,
1880s.
Going back to Scalp Hunter, going into the future, going into it's literally centuries long. Plus, there's about 25 characters. He flushes them all out.
Yeah, it was.
It's scalped. It is scalped.
More than that, you know what it is? It's Harry Potter.
No, it's scalped because scalped. If you follow Dashiell for 3 issues, and then you go back and you learn about his dad for an issue. Then you come back to the story, and then learn about one of the hitmen for an issue.
In that case, isn't Scalp Starman? Starman came from
Scalp this Starman, which means Dashiell's going into space for a year. So.
Oh, that would be. I bet R.M. Guerra leaves the book at that point.
But what's interesting is the book is called Starman. It's focused on Jack Knight, but that supporting cast as the series grows. So we get his father Ted Knight. We get the Shade, which steals the show.
One of the best
characters of the whole thing, who's like kind of like an anti-villain.
He was a villain.
But he doesn't want to admit that he's being a hero. But anyway, so there's the Shade. Then we get introduced to the O'Dares, this family of policemen that have a history throughout Opal City. That and he starts adding on more characters. But what's interesting is that as it goes through the whole 80 or so issues, there are ties between the characters and history. And you find out about the Shades feud with a family called the Ludlows, and that's a recurring theme. And the history of the O'Dares, and that's a recurring theme. And the history of Ted Knight and his family.
And how Scalp Hunter gets tied into it.
And it just all continues and plods along until the very end in the second to last story arc, where it just all ties together. And you get into a scenario where he puts everyone in the same room, and all those old grudges are happening, and they all get resolved. Like, it's amazing.
You know what? I was telling Josh and I were talking about it when I was reading Volume 6, and I said, I think this, when this is all said and done, unless it falls off the table, which didn't, this will be one of the greatest comic book epics that I've ever read.
With no hyperbole at all.
Not all.
I'm right there.
I'm really glad to hear that you both. Were
I couldn't. I mean, like the thing
I couldn't stop reading.
Because you had read the first. I bought you the first 2 trades, and you read them 2 or 3 times. You're like, I don't know.
What happened was I went to visit Josh once, and he was like at work, and so I was like reading trades during the day, and I read the first 2 trades at your house, and then you got me them for Christmas. I read them again, and then we did a audio show on the first one, so I read it again. So I ended up reading the first 2 trades about 6 times before I ever got to the next story. So I really got
You know this one really well.
You know what? That's important to know. We did a couple of longer talk spots, and we're going to keep doing them where we really get into depth on these, and when we talk about them, we've done the first 2. You can go to the website and find those, or Book Splodes.
Audio podcast.
Yep. And this is important. The first time that you read the first one, it's a little hard to get into. I'll be honest with you. Sometimes you read it because it's kind of wordy. Even Robinson admits it.
Robinson is traditionally wordy, but for whatever reason, I read this first one with no knowledge of the character, no other than just the stick and the whole thing. Well, I read this first one, and I could not wait for the second one.
Yeah.
And it was the kind of thing where when each one got solicited, I bought it the day it came out, and it was read by Friday.
I think what I mean is but for a lot of people, not necessarily you guys, and I've heard this a lot, is that especially the first 4 or 5 issues. I think that some people are like, I don't know if I want this. And what I'm saying to you is keep going.
But also, he has a stylized voice that he carries through the entire series. I mean, he may have refined it by the end, but the dialogue is, I mean, it's not realistic in most cases. It's very stylized. The dialogue between Jack and Sadie, his girlfriend, is very sort of old 40s movies like style. They call each other honey and
sweetie,
baby and stuff that's, you wouldn't say in normal conversation, but there's a very much a feel to Starman that's very, it's very different.
It's almost a timelessness because there's a bunch of that.
Chicago Comic and Entertainment Expo, also known as C2E2. March 18th through 20th. McCormick Place in downtown Chicago. Graphic novels, comics, games. C2E2. C2E2.
C2E2 is awesome.
C2E2.com. Movies. TV. Cosplay.
We are at C2E2 in Chicago.
Meet me there, please.
I guess before we should talk about the art, because we're talking about James Robinson, we're talking about the words and things like that, but the other side of this is the art, and without the art as it is, it's not an epic story.
So, as important. So the first artist was Tony Harris from issues 0 to 45, which
mostly,
some fill-ins, and
he did all the covers. He did
all the covers for the entire run. He did all the covers of these omnibuses. Tony Harris from his recent work on Ex Machina. And great to see Tony Harris early on in his career. To see him evolve his style and his because you see traces of it early on, but when you first get it, it's kind of jarring, and it was like, oh
yeah. It's interesting because the first time I read through these, I like Tony Harris. I read all of Ex Machina. I'm a fan, and I didn't love everything he did. And I read this the first time, and when they switched artists eventually, I was like, I think I like the second artist more. But this time that I went through it, the second time, I really think that you needed Tony Harris to do a couple of things. A, establish what these guys look like, and they all because he uses a photo referencer, and I don't mean that in a bad way. But he builds all of his stuff on photos and real people, so that there's a sense of acting, and also it lends a sense of reality to this, but not in the stiff way that people think of.
The thing is, I think this is a rare, and I don't know what the origin of Robinson and Tony Harris working together on this, but both James Robinson and Tony Harris both have a strong affinity for things of the 1940s, the vintage, and it's one of those rare cases of a writer and artist coming together, and I would imagine it was in sync, just totally getting it. And and we've interviewed Tony Harris. We talked about this book before. We talked to James Robinson a little bit about it before. They use the same words and the same kind of enthusiasm. So it's that interesting kind of melding of the two.
More than the characters, I think the environment was really important.
Right.
And I don't think you have Opal looking the way it does. It's very Art Deco-y, and it's as much of a character as the characters are. If you have another artist,
almost more than any city.
Now, Opal City is my favorite city in the DC universe now. Yeah. But what's interesting is that Tony Harris left the book kind of in a bit of a huff.
Well, and this is interesting because having just read it, basically a lot of things happened around issue 45. The series editor Archie Goodwin died, and I think that had a lot to do with it.
That was a big.
The guy's a legend, and he was really close to both writer and artist.
Oh, man,
I don't get the sense
the tribute to him.
Was I don't get the sense that Tony and James were really close during the making of this.
It says the omnibuy have afterwards, where James Robinson talks about the very honest detail.
Very honest.
He said they met like once or twice. I mean,
right.
The typical comic collaboration.
Right.
They didn't really know.
But they were still in sync, as you were saying.
Yeah.
Now, at a certain point, Jack goes into space. That's all that really needs to be said.
It's a story,
and Tony was like, I don't want to do
He's
that.
He's like, and it's a rare. I mean, it's a known. I mean, both creators have talked about this. Tony Harris said, I don't think you should take Jack into space. And James Robinson said, well, that's where the story's going. And he goes, if you send Jack to space, I'm going to leave the book. And James said, well, he's going to space. And Tony said, okay, I'm out.
And that was at the same time that Archie Goodwin had gone, and new editor Pete Tomasi came on.
Yep.
Interesting. I was thinking about this. Pete Tomasi, inked by Keith Champagne.
The Mighty.
That's they did that, which we talked about in another show.
Well, the second artist, when that happens, then Peter Snejbjerg comes in, and he's the artist for the rest of the. There's also again a fill-ins every once in a while, but depending on the story. But he's pretty much the last. He's the artist for the last omnibus completely. So
really,
the last.
He did a great job in the last omnibus worth of stuff.
Within a few
changes
issues,
the look and the feel, which is different.
Within a few issues, he had it though.
But it's a completely different. Like if you look at
which is
1, 2, and 5, and 6,
which is, by the way, totally the right choice.
Yeah.
Because if they mentioned this, and I think in one of the afterwards, if they had gone with a guy who was trying to ape Tony Harris,
it wouldn't
have worked.
And it helped that Snejbjerg came on in space, so it was a completely different environment. So you didn't have those shoes to fill. There was some time to breathe. It must have been years. In this
he wrote the intro to book 5, I think, which is really interesting to read.
Yeah.
No, and I just agree. Like if they had gone with a guy who looked like Tony Harris, it would have failed. I think, at least in that sort of that sense. One of the other things is that as you go through these, there's a lot of specials and a lot of miniseries and things like that, things that are thrown in.
Great Hellboy crossover
with
Hellboy and Batman.
Amazing artists.
Yeah.
I mean, name somebody who's awesome. Like Gene Ha did a Bobo Benetti issue in here, which is wonderful. There's J.H. Williams in one of these.
Mignola did the Hellboy issue. It was.
There's a crossover, and the first time I read it, there's a crossover with the Shazam book, or the
it was the Power of Shazam.
Mount Marvel, whatever. Yeah. And the first time I read it, I was like, this is so stupid. I don't like the way they talk. Yeah. And now that I read it this time, I was like, I was okay with it. It was weird to watch.
Peter Snejbjerg drew that.
Yeah, it's funny because we say that Starman existed on its own, but Jack Knight, Starman had there were crossovers like that. He was a prominent character in the JSA.
Yeah.
Like so, even though this stands on its own, the character has greater ties to it, and through the length of this story. James Robinson lays down this groundwork of really tying a lot of the DC universe back to Starman.
He loves the DC universe. Yep. There's a lot of JSA in this book. A lot. All the old characters come through at some point.
There's
great team-ups. And the Sandman team-up won an Eisner for the best storyline in 95.
Yeah.
There's the Jay Garrick, Alan Scott. Everybody shows up at some point.
There's an enormous Superman retcon.
Yes.
In here. Enormous. Like that has huge implications.
Let's get into let's get the spoiler warning out. Let's get the... We're going to talk about some specific storylines here if you haven't read it. You may
Things we like the most, and that sort of thing.
I'm sort of going to jump around. I loved, in the end, how you had all these sort of disparate DC C and D-list characters come through and be badass.
Yep.
Yeah.
Black Condor. Adam Strange is a huge...
I love
He is awesome.
This made me love Adam Strange, this book.
Elongated Man. You had guys come in, Phantom Lady, come in, characters who people don't even really care about.
Who are heroes.
And they come in and kick ass in this book. I love that about it.
Well, and so, take it all the way back, I think that, except for the end, the Grand Guignol, which is sort of the last sort of hurrah of the whole thing, the Sand and Stars story really was the moment for me where I was like, this is kick
And that's the story where Jack Knight teams up with Wesley Dodds, the original Sandman.
And he's
elderly, and
with a cane.
And it's like a bridge to his father's life, and really what a lot of the theme of this book, like we said, is coming of age for Jack Knight, and really what it is it's him reconnecting with his father and understanding what is the work that his father did, and admitting that he loves his father and healing all those wounds. And I think without that Sandman story, none of that happens, because it was a connection that it was kind of like, imagine if you don't know your dad really well and you go hang out with one of his buddies. Mm-hmm. That's what it was.
But they weren't even that close. That was the cool. Like exactly, they kept saying that. They're like, well, we knew each other.
Well, and that's somebody from his unit. If you
that's what right. But that's what everybody kept telling Jack over and over was that they didn't know him. So like he starts to think.
Even Jay Garrick says that in the
and that's this continuing theme. He's like, I didn't even really know him that well. Yeah. And so you get to see that it's not so much that Jack was an asshole, but that his dad also had faults, and they both come to accept that together.
Yep.
I guess the quick overall story is Jack becomes Starman in the beginning. He doesn't want to. He starts to become more and more into it. He actually likes being Starman by the middle. Mm-hmm. Shade is the character on the side, and by the end, you think maybe he's bad. This entire thing happens where
there are murders happening.
There are murders. The Shade blocks out the whole city with this orb. Turns out the Shade was being controlled by this other Shade character.
This guy who had similar powers.
This midget who was inside him, which is a little weird, but
the midget inside.
And then by the end, to save the day, the father dies, saving Opal from a bomb. There's a lot of characters, so there's a lot of you can't really sum it up, but
that's which is good.
Dealing with the death was, I think, fantastic.
Oh, the funeral issue was amazing.
Not only that, the final.
The death itself.
There's a talking with David issue, which is the dead brother who dies in the first issue. He comes back every year, and he talks to his.
It sounds so ridiculous to explain. There's also a pirate.
It really is ridiculous.
Before Opal City was Opal City, it was called the City of Soul or something, Souls or something like that. I forgot. Port of Souls.
Port of Souls, yeah.
And there was a murder in the town, and it got pinned on this pirate,
John Valor.
And before he died, John Valor, and before he died, he gave a curse on all the city members, saying no one will rest until he's avenged.
No one will go to heaven.
Yeah. And basically, for whatever reason, that curse came through, and John Valor's ghost keeps on going to people in Opal City over the years, saying, "Can you help me? I want to, vindicate myself." And because of that curse, everyone who dies in Opal City just kind of stayed around as ghosts, and including Jack Knight, Starman's brother. And so once a year, through what's his name, the old Dr. Fate.
Kent Nelson.
Kent Nelson is able to visit Jack once a year, or visit a Starman once a year, and talk to him and help him.
Those are always the best issues. But
yes,
my favorite one was the final one, because he brings the dad along who just died.
Yep.
And my favorite moment of the entire series is they're in some sort of afterlife world, and they're talking, and he's elderly dad. They go, "No, we want to see you as you were when you were Starman." So he becomes himself as young Starman. They're both just like in awe of him, because he was an impressive hero, and they never really knew him like that. So suddenly they see this young, virile in the costume, and they're both
the
like,
suit
"Wow."
as wool, by the way.
Yeah.
Is that just me?
Probably, but it was really about connecting this family back together.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, my favorite part of this.
My standout my two favorite things about it were the Shade. I thought the Shade was one of the best characters I've ever read, and the fact that James Robinson is going to return to the Shade and do a Shade maxi series soon, I can't wait for. Because we got the Blackest Night. Starman
81,
which is also in here.
Yeah, which is also in that, which focuses on the Shade, which was awesome. But every time the Shade was in it, and all the tales of the Shade, stuff like that, I love that. But my favorite thing, and like I said earlier, was the fact that he laid out all these characters, and in that last storyline with the Orb and with Culp and the Shade and everything, it all ties together.
It really did. It was
amazing.
And
everything did. And the thing is that that's a natural ending point, but he didn't. And then, so we have that huge storyline, and then we get a 3-issue tale where he goes back in time to 1951, and then we get the last issue. And I thought
that did tie up, though, that one last loose end that they've been dragging out there the whole time.
It really was amazing that everything, and you wonder how much of it was actually seeded and planted, or he just went, "Whoa, that'll work." But everything comes together at the end, which is amazing.
It was like the kind of thing where every volume I read, there was another piece of the puzzle where I got to tip my hat to James Robinson. Totally genius. Totally.
It's funny because this is one of those series. A lot of times, I will be able to tell you I loved this series, but I don't necessarily remember single bits of it. I don't remember issues. This is actually one where I remember specific issues. When I think back, like some of my favorites, there's one of David's visits where he takes Jack to dinner
with the JSA,
and they're all on the table, and they're fighting like a family.
Yeah.
And some of them are nice, like, "You be quiet," and it was just so well done. It was that family tension thing.
Yeah.
Another one.
Shred the JSA. That's really what.
Well, he did.
They should
put him on that. So the JSA.
After that, one of my favorite issues was Starman 51. Starman 51, they land on Krypton.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Before
that's the
back in time.
So the Superman retcon is that they go into space and they get thrown forward in time, back in time. They end up on Krypton back in time, meeting a young Jor-El. Yeah. And young Jor-El They get captured on Krypton. They're going to get dissected, and young Jor-El helps them escape. And right before they leave, Jack Knight tells Jor-El where Earth is.
And he gives him the picture of the farmer from Man of Steel.
Yeah. And that plants the seed so that when he needs to, he sends Kal-El to Earth. Mm-hmm. And so without Jack Knight going back in time and meeting Jor-El, maybe Superman never comes to Earth.
Yeah.
I like that because, A, it was ballsy as hell.
Yes.
But that wasn't even the part of the story that got me. It was that I've never seen a story about Jor-El. I'd never seen
a young Jor-El.
And, like, it was just planning this story about why Superman may be the way he is because his father was a really cool, like, legacy. He was such a young kid. You know, it was, again, that legacy.
Grandpa L.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a bastard.
Big head dick.
But then you came back to that in the end when Superman shows up and says...
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's
like Oz.
Sounded bad.
I'm ignoring it. Superman shows up and says, "Hey, so you hung out with my dad? How you know?" And that was a really nice issue. Like, what was that like?
That was great.
And then he says, "What? You met my grandfather?" Like he didn't even really know about his grandfather. Then he's like, "Wait, why didn't you tell him to save Krypton?"
Yeah. Which I thought Jack's explanation was great. He's like, listen. He's like, you came to Earth. That was destiny. That was going to happen. Anything else I told your father might have changed anything. Like, what if he saved Krypton or not? What if he, like all the time travel?
What if he worked so hard trying to save it, but then he didn't send you, and everyone died?
Yeah, exactly.
Here's something. Mm-hmm. There is a story in here that has Solomon Grundy in it that I don't hate.
Yeah, great Solomon Grundy.
I've never, and like that sort of ascendance of Michael Thomas, which
we're
is
not
the
even touching on the current Starman.
Oddest thing ever. Like, he's in the 70s, he's a cokehead, then he's gay.
They got away with a lot in this with Michael Thomas.
Yes, they did.
There was like a threesome, and there was a lot of drug use with him. I was pretty surprised.
I don't think this is the code.
There's 80 plus issues. There's so much dense material here.
You get so much out of this.
Yeah.
This is an amazing series.
I mean, if anybody asks for a self-contained superhero story, this is the one to go to. You got all these omnibuses that are in print. Get them while you can because you will try. It is one of the best stories of the '90s, if you ask me. I mean, like one of the best series.
I don't even say the '90s. It's one of the best stories. Yeah, it's
a classic.
Yeah. So go to iFanboy.com. There'll be a post about this episode. If you've read Starman, tell everyone what you thought of it. If you have any questions or you need anything explained or anything like that, good discussion happening over iFanboy.com. Go there.
Contact at iFanboy is our email address, and 88fanboy3262697 is our voicemail.
Did that all without breathing. Twitter.com/iFanboy is one way that you can follow us on the web. If you go to iFanboy.com/about, there'll be all the other ways that you can do that, too. Yep. And it's an active thing.
Yeah, exactly. Go to iFanboy.com/store. That's where you can sign up for an iFanboy membership, where you can get some cool swag in the mail, as well as be eligible for all of our giveaways and fun stuff and that sort of thing. So,
word.
When he meets the Morrison-era JLA, they are dicks.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, they are.
Well, he's small time.
That was the one I was like...
Yeah. Well, that recruiting... remember those recruiting issues? That was, They were dicks to Hitman, too.
Yeah, but that was a joke. But he was like, I need to borrow a ship. No, we might need our ship.
Let me get this straight.
All right.
A duster.
A duster? Not really a duster.
Leather jacket.
Leather jacket.
Some welding goggles.
It was one of those 90s car coats. You know what I'm talking about, too. The guy on the Werewolf World. Yeah. I loved you! You had a leather car coat.
I'm loving you.
Sitting here and telling you I love you.
I'm loving you. And it's killing me.